Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Do you struggle with being negative? Most people struggle with being negative. Being positive takes action. Using simple positive actions will allow you to win each day. Being negative is a discharge in 3 key areas. Number 1, your mindset to achieve your goals. Number 2, your influence on self and others. And number 3, your ability to learn and grow. Implementing simple positive actions into your life will allow you to win each day. Being positive takes action, so let's work to be positive. To receive a weekly video email from me on one simple positive action, subscribe to the series by going to chargepodcast.com to get the link to register today. Life is short, so why live your life by default when you can live your life by design? Make it a great day.
Welcome, Chargers. Can you believe we're almost to the end of third quarter? Yes, 2022 is flying by, but you know what? We want to bring different guests with different viewpoints, so it really helps your business decide what you need to do. And today I've got one of those guests that's really going to make a difference. So you're going to have to listen up because we always have to brand our business. And we'll talk more about this as we get into it. But Kate, if you would you share with the listeners, what problem will you solve for our Charge Podcast listeners today?
Sure. Well, Gary, my name's Kate DiLeo, and I'm a brand strategist, and I am here today to help you understand the main components of how do you build a brand for your business that enables you to win more work.
Oh, we like to win at work and we like to win in business. So we're entrepreneurs and small business owners. So today, Kate DiLeo's branding approach is rooted in her firm belief that brand is the path of least resistance to revenue. She teaches you how to eliminate complex and ineffective brand storytelling by delivering a simple yet provocative message that tells prospects what you do, how you solve their problem, and how you differ from the competition. The outcome? Brand conversations that convert. Kate is honored to have partnered with more than 200 brands across 20 sectors. She is passionate about helping organizations craft messaging that brings more prospects to the table, more users who click, and more customers who buy, and we like that. And her book, Muting the Megaphone, Stop Telling Stories and Start Having Conversations, just released in July of 2022. Congratulations on that, Kate. Kate, thanks for joining us on the Charge Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Gary. It's just an honor to be here, and I'm excited to dig into the conversation today.
Well, I love branding and marketing and all those different areas. And today it's tough for small business owners and entrepreneurs today is how do I distinguish? How do I set myself apart? And I know you're a believer of this, and I am too, that branding is one of the ways that we do that. So let's start from the kind of more of what I would call the general level, and we'll build up as we go along today. What are 3 key messaging components that you believe of brands that wins more at work?
Absolutely. So by the way, can we just call out the fact that when we hear this word brand, it just sounds like fluff, doesn't it? It does just sounds like, oh, what is this? That's super the creative stuff. And now, by the way, I'll tell you, I'm such a pragmatist when I talk about brand. And while I'm not going to talk about the visual side of brand with you, Gary, which is like, logo and colors, and hey, those are really important. What I do want to talk about is the power of your brand message. And when we think about the message that you put into the world for yourself and your business, there are actually 3 key components for that brand in order to get more of the right prospects to the right table at the right time. And if we break those down, it's the following. It's number 1, you need to have a tagline that clearly articulates what you do. Number 2, you need to follow that up with a value proposition statement that is really the big, bold, audacious statement that answers the question, here's how I solve your very specific heart pain.
Yeah.
And then finally, the third component, Gary, is a set of what we call differentiator statements. It's really like often your three uniques. It's the 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 big bullet points, right? Of how you're different and better than the rest. That is the stuff of a message that ultimately is going to provoke more of the right kind of prospects to come to the table.
Well, and I love what you're sharing there, because the tagline kind of starts to set you apart already.
Yes.
Is the way I'm seeing this. Your value proposition is saying what you offer to your customers, clients. And then when you talk about the differentiator statements, it's what really sets you apart. And today, the challenge is if we look like, sound like, and we're like everyone else, we are like them. And then you're only working on one thing, price.
That's right.
This price. So share with me a little bit when you're working with companies then on those three, like with a tagline, and maybe if you want to use an example or a sample that you use there, why do you think that's so important with the tagline and value propositions to be put in place?
You know, it's really critical because when you think about actually the way that you would have a conversation with somebody, I always bring this back to very practical buyer psychology or a scenario. But Gary, imagine if we're in a room and we meet each other. You know, what is the first thing that somebody asks you? What do you do, Kate?
Yeah.
And so if you don't have a tagline that can address that can follow that up, whether you say it verbally in the Zoom room, you're at a Chamber of Commerce event, or of course on your website, you've missed the first thing that somebody wants to know about you. In fact, what's fascinating that people don't understand is that when you first meet somebody, when somebody first meets your brand or your business, they don't care yet about your amazing products or services until you can actually break some of this down. And so by having a very clear tagline that tells somebody what you do, it just breaks open the door to start that brand conversation with your prospect. And for example, I had a client that worked in the tax industry. Now talk about the most boring topic, right? You know, most of us, we know tax, it's necessary, but do we really want to do it? Right. And so when I started working with this company, you know, they said, well, we do taxes. I said, well, that's a great tagline. How's that going for you? And, you know, they chuckled and they said, well, we're not really getting the same response. Well, at the end of the project, we changed their tagline to be making compliance and taxes effortless. See, the thing is they help small business owners make that process as seamless as possible. And that was provocative to get somebody to go, what do you mean by that? I'd like to know more.
Yeah, and it opens up, like you said, it opens up the conversation.
That's
and right. You set yourself apart. So part of that, even with the tagline, you really are starting to set up some of your value proposition. Am I correct there?
That's exactly right. In fact, this is what the power of branding is great brands don't just shout a big story at you, do they? It's not about just one-way monologue, is it? What happens is if you have a great tagline that you deliver, Gary, it provokes somebody to go, okay, hold on. What do you mean by that? It serves you up beautifully to say, well, here's what I mean about that is here's what I know your pain with taxes is. And hey, if you partner with me, here's what you're going to experience. Here's how I can solve that for you. They're opening the door for you to expound on it in a very specific way that says, all right, Mr. or Miss Customer, here's how I can specifically help you.
Yeah,
value proposition.
That. Well, I think one area that at least I do, and I think other business owners have this challenge too, is try to how to get really some differentiator statements you talked about. And because we like to say we have the best customer service, we're local, we're, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they hear that all the time. You know, we're the best grass cutting company in the Midwest, you know, whatever. So how do you help people? I guess my question is to put you a little bit on the spot because, you know, I get to learn from this and, you know, I'm doing this right now is how do you help them differentiate so they don't sound like everyone else too?
Well, let me address this in two parts because there's two things ultimately with your brand as a whole that are going to make you seem and feel different. Now, certainly you have to have a list of differentiators, Gary, like we're talking about, of like the 1, 2, 3, 4 ways that you're different and better than the rest. And those things often fall in line with maybe it's accuracy of your process, maybe it's speed. Maybe you're really fast and great at what you do. And so speed is something that somebody's looking at you versus the competitors for. Maybe it's Your approach. Maybe you take a very educational or comprehensive approach. For example, in my world, I differentiate myself for the fact that I do deliver a physical brand playbook that's 30 pages long, and I'm very educational in my process. That does make me stand out. Now, if your approach is different, and if your deliverable is different, those are differentiators. We want to avoid things, though, such as, oh, my team is the best. Listen, everybody can say that their team is the best, right? We start to sound like our competitors the moment we start talking about some of those things. So that being said, if though you do have a level of experience that is far above the competitor's team, you can call that out. Same with price point. If you actually do bring a higher level of value, you can talk about that. What we want to be careful of is just price shopping, though. And so differentiators, of course, are there to support the value conversation versus the price conversation. So that's part one, Gary. And I'll finish this up by telling you, when we think about how do we really seem different from our competitor, the other piece of the pie, whenever you're thinking about looking at your messaging, is also taking a look at your tone of voice or personality as a brand. So imagine your brand were a person. Who would it be? Are you Ryan Reynolds? Are you Oprah? Are you Kevin Hart? Are you Donald Trump? Are you Simon Sinek? Who are you, right? But what we want to think about is the talk track in our mind, because we know what these very famous celebrities and public figures sound like. And here's the thing. When we write brand, like anything, often it starts out with a bunch of corporate mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
And so in order for us to tighten it up and make sure it feels like us and sounds like us and has the humor or the seriousness that we have, who we are, we kind of need to get aligned with our personality and tone, Gary, as a brand. This really ensures that whenever we go write the thing, that it really comes across as who we are. And then that person on the other end of the conversation goes, gosh, that felt so much like Gary in the conversation I had with him. Yes, this is, I like him. And that's what we want.
Right. That's excellent. I appreciate it. I have to ask, Kate, what is your personality?
Okay. Have you ever seen the show Mad Men?
I have.
I'm Peggy from Mad Men.
Oh, okay.
She's no nonsense. She's got a sense of humor. She does great work. She can roll with the guys. She's a go-getter. She cares. But you know what? She gets her job done and she does it well and with a level of candor. That's me. So that was my personality I picked.
I can tell already. And we've just got to know each other for a short amount of time. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So my second question, and we've had some others that was follow-ups from my other one, is how can business owners really determine which prospects have the highest probability of converting?
Well, it is interesting because in the branding process, when you're going through this journey, if you say to yourself, gosh, I'm at a point where I've got a new product or service, or, hey, my messaging's not working for me, or, geez, what I was traditionally saying is no longer resonating, or any of those things, you might be at a point in time as you're listening going, oh, I should go back and look at my messaging. Well, I'll tell you, in the process of asking yourself, what do I say? There's a critical piece here of actually asking, who am I going after and why? And have I really defined what the ideal buyer looks like? Do I have a set of buyer criteria, Gary, that include 20 or 30 psychographics and not just demographics to help me understand who has the highest probability of purchasing and working well with me and having the best experience? Because as soon as I can get that nailed down with specific buyer criteria, I'm then able to write a message that's going to speak to the heart pain that they need solved.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because the challenge is, of course, when we're just speaking to ourselves,
that's right,
we're speaking to the wrong ones. And our messaging, when it's off, then of course, we're not attracting our ideal client, avatar, or whatever word you want to use.
That's right. Often you would say to yourself, the logic would say, okay, well, let's go get the message and get out there and spread the message through marketing and sales channels and see who comes. But that's more of a spray and pray approach. And I have to tell you, the best brands are very surgical. They niche in and they make a very firm decision, Gary, that they are not there to convince everybody to buy from them. They're there to convert the ones who have the specific pain that they can solve. We are not in the business of convincing. We are in the business of converting. And it does mean that as business owners and leaders, we have to be audacious enough to make a decision on niching in on one or two groups that we think we can serve the best and that are going to really find value versus trying to serve anybody and everybody.
Yeah. When that client says, who do you serve? And they say, oh, everyone. Normally when they serve everyone, they serve
no one.
No one.
That is right.
we are right on that. So how about what can a business do to hone really their brand's tone and voice that you just talked about and their personality to really better engage those target audiences?
Sure. You know what? The most practical exercise that you could do if you're listening today is I would love for you to do kind of what I mentioned earlier. Get a piece of paper and I want you to think about the following question. If my brand were a person, who would it be? And I want you to envision that celebrity or public figure in your mind. And before you start documenting, well, we're kind and we're fun and we're super smart and I always do the right thing. Well, hold on. I want you to think about how they sound. If you're Oprah, we know what Oprah sounds like. You get a school. Woo! We know how Ryan Reynolds sounds with that self-deprecating dry humor. Kevin Hart, think about Kevin Hart, the comedian or a famous actor, You may like the personality traits of them, but I want to push you to think about, would you know how they would talk? If you closed your eyes, could you hear them in your mind? Choose the person that you can hear in your mind who truly talks and sounds like you. You're then going to use that, Gary, all throughout your process when you're wordsmithing and working on your tagline and all these things to go back and go, how would Oprah say it? I just finished a brand with Clint Eastwood. That's the tone of voice. And I kept bringing them back and I said, how would Clint say it? And they chuckled and they're like, well, he certainly wouldn't use the word, process oriented. I said, that is right. So what would he say, right? It really moves us up and away from corporate mumbo jumbo into language that is so authentic to us and truly is going to be authentic and resonate with your audiences.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So I have to ask, you've just released the book in July, so it's still new. We're in September here when this is being audience is listening to it. Share with us, if someone buys your book, Muting the Megaphone, Stop Telling Stories and Start Having Conversations. If someone bought that, what can they expect from the book?
Well, I have to tell you, by the way, if you had asked me a year ago if I'd read a book, I said, no, Gary, that's the dumbest idea. Who has time for that? But here I am, mom of four, and I somehow managed to write a book. Call me crazy. But I'll tell you, the reason I wrote this book, and here's why I think it's important, is I kept getting asked, Kate, can you just write down your process of what you do with your clients? Could you seriously just put it down? And can I go then through that on my own? And so honestly, Gary, this book is only 100 pages. It is really your tactical guide of A plus B plus C, every single step, including tone of voice and target audiences and all the pieces. How do you go through the process from point A to point B of actually writing your brand and implementing your brand in a way that it's going to enable you to win more work?
Excellent. And congratulations on that, because I saw you're an international bestseller.
Thank you.
Shows you do that and do the work. Even though you thought, I don't have time, it pays off. And it shows that the information you're sharing, audiences want it. And that's why we do the podcast, is to help them. But I want them to know about the book, because I want them to, if they want that resource, they can go back to it. Plus, you have a lot of great resources on your website. So why don't you go ahead and share that at this time too? And then also tell them how they can pick up a copy of the book.
That sounds great. And so, if you're listening and you're curious about this whole approach to branding, like we've been talking about, and you want to understand a bit more, first off, you can go ahead to my website, which is www.katedileo.com. And I know Gary will put that in the show notes. And you can also follow me and connect with me right away on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, that's my main platform. I would love to get a message from you if you heard the podcast. And if you have a specific question on branding, I respond to those personally. So please feel free to send me a message. Ask your question. And right on my website or on Amazon.com, you can go ahead and purchase my book, Muting the Megaphone.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And we will have that in show notes, like you said, at chargepodcast.com to make it easy. The one thing I really was excited about bringing you on is because I'm like you. I think people think they've got branding wrong, that it's about the colors and it's everything else. No, it's what you're telling them. And like you said, the tagline, value proposition, and those differentiators. And if you get those right in your business, that will separate you from 95% of other businesses?
Absolutely, it will. It's brand. Your brand is your promise of what you say, of who you are, and the value that you bring. And so if you don't have that language written down in such a way where somebody goes, wow, now that's interesting. You just read my mail. I like this. I want to come to the table and have a conversation. If your brand is not doing that, this is your opportunity to just do a quarter turn. This isn't about rebranding. This is not about reinventing who you are. This is really and truly just getting focused and doing that quarter turn or that tightening of the bolt to get your language dialed in such a way that it truly provokes more of the right people to the right table at the right time.
Yeah. Well, Kate, great information you've shared with the listeners today and small business owners. This is one of them, to be quite honest. I'm going to go back and listen again. And that's what I would suggest to the chargers, because you got to dial it in. Then get her book. And then if you're looking for someone to help you with that process, that's what Kate does. Seek her out on her website, and you can definitely do that, because I'm telling you, it will be a differentiator in your business. You'll set yourself apart. And that's what we're all trying to do as small businesses. When we look like, sound like the same, we can't be that. Then we're only competing on one thing: price.
That's right.
Normally that's a losing proposition when all you're competing on is price, because it's always got to be the lowest. So, Kate, before I let you go, I'd like to ask you 2 questions in the recharge round, I call it. Charge is our podcast name, but it's also a mantra of mine: create habits around real goals every day. What habit do you think's led to success in your life?
One of the biggest habits that I've learned to truly get into the habit of doing is saying no to the good to say yes to the great.
Mm-hmm.
There are thousands of opportunities that come our way as business owners and leaders, and we have to be audacious and very tenacious and very bold to recognize, out of all the things that could help us or serve us, what's the right thing? And am I willing to take a huge bet, a trusted bet, that I could even say no to a prospect if it's not an ideal fit, and know that I can get more of my ideal buyers, my ideal partners? Gary, I'll tell you the outcome of really choosing to do that and no longer leading from a place of desperation, but instead leading from invitation. That has enabled me to triple my business in only 2 years. That's the power of what it means to daily practice that. If everything comes in your inbox, if everything comes on your plate, asking ourselves, is this good or is this right and great?
Yeah. And I would tell you, as entrepreneurs too, is knowing when to say no to the other things that's outside of your area.
That's right.
That's a big one, because, we are squirrels. We like to go after and chase lots of different things, because that's a known trait of entrepreneurs, that we like to, oh, wow, that shiny object is there. And when you focus in, I talk a lot about clarity.
Yes.
When you get clear on that with my business coaching, when you get clear where you're going to reach there quicker, faster, and you're probably going to have better results than you even predicted.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you for sharing that. My second one is, we all have failures. We've all made mistakes. We would love to have do-overs, love to have the little fairy come and give us the pixel dust and say, you can redo this now, but we don't get that. But if you looked at one of your failures, what do-over would you want from them?
I would have gotten off the hustle wheel a heck of a lot faster. I'm 37, and 2 years ago, this book actually had to go on hold for a year because I almost had a heart attack. And I was a single mom at the time. And here I was in a position where hustle to try and be like I thought I was supposed to be, as every entrepreneur out there that's on the big screen, actually brought me into burnout. And what I realized was that if I could go back and do it over and be confident enough to put extreme boundaries on my time and my energy, that I would actually have far better results, not only in my business, but in my personal life. I would find a sense of peace and satisfaction that I really can have it all. And it really comes down to how determined I am to be disciplined and being able to say, hey, this is my maximum capacity, and that's okay.
Yeah. That is beautiful. Thanks, Kate, for sharing that, because I just wrote an article, and, burnout is becoming huge across all industries, but in entrepreneurs, it's even growing more. And if we don't find ways to really say no to certain things and then really find what's most important to us, we're not going to reach that. And you have that capability now, because entrepreneurs, you're there listening, small business owners, you're listening to this podcast, you're trying to pick up little tips that will help you slow it down to actually speed up.
That's
and
right.
Really find out what's most important to you, and you'll see your business will take off with that. Kate, I can't thank you enough for being on the Charge podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Gary. This was a fun conversation, and I just appreciate it.
Well, it was great to have you. And Chargers, I'm going to give you this action. I want you to go back, number one, and listen to it. But then I want you to take the challenge. What is your tagline? What is your value proposition? What are your differentiator statements? And she's got some resources on her website that you can go to, some videos that's there. If not, you've got the resource of the book. And she said she'll walk you through that. Because the reason I want you to do this, because if it's not just you, and you think if you don't have them and you have employees, or I like to call them team members, and they don't have those, what do you think's happened in your sales? What message are they selling? What brand is that customer getting? You change those three things, and I guarantee you'll have more business coming in. And from Kate's expertise, she's going to help us along that path. So thank you, Kate.
Thanks so much, Gary.
Make it a great day, Chargers. We'll see you back here next week with another great guest. Thanks for joining us.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.